Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic, and today I'm bringing you an update to my most popular YouTube video, Varina Lich Queen. So, since I made the last video, I've had lots of chances to play the deck and test it out, and to update it accordingly. I also got lots of great suggestions in the comments of the last video, so thank you very much to everyone who pitched in. So before we get started, I just want to remind you to please like this video if you like it. Hit that like button, helps out a lot. Alright, so on to the deck tag. This is Varina the Lich Queen, the zombie wizard, lord of all the zombies, though, not a lord. So Varina is a zombie wizard, 4/4 legendary creature, for 1, a white, a blue, and a black, which are Esper colors. And she says, whenever you attack with 1 or more zombies, draw that many cards, then discard that many cards, you gain that much life. And also for 2 mana, you can exile 2 cards from your graveyard, and then create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So, I have to say that this second ability is the one that I most often forgot when I had the commander, so I want everyone to remember that, to remember this ability, because it is actually one of her more powerful abilities, just the ability to, pitch cards from your graveyard to be able to create black zombies, and that synergizes with the strategy I'm going with this deck, which is more of a combo deck. Alright, so this deck is built more to kind of combo off with the zombies rather than to, overwhelm the board with zombies. But what's great about it is it also has that option in there as well. If you need to overwhelm the board with zombies, then we have that ability. So we have a total of 30 creatures in the deck, and we have a total of, well, including Varina, I guess we got, 31 creatures in the deck. And she's really important too. And so then therefore we have 30 cards that have the ability to either, that are either zombies or have the ability to create zombies. So we got at least a third of the deck is, just getting zombies out there. But the other thing about the deck, having white in the deck also just gives you lots of great removal options, certainly. And if you're playing more of the aggro strategy, I guess you might put in more, anthems than I put in here. Also, you might have more lords than I have in this deck. I don't have that many lords. I only have about 3 of the lords. But what I'm again going more for is the combo. But so with Varina, the problems that you might run into with this deck are Blood Moon is one possibility. It could just totally ruin your land. And then also just, if people board wipe you and you don't have that ability to get your creatures back from the graveyard, it can really slow you down, certainly. So having ways to get your creatures back is really important in here, recurring them. So let's get on to the deck. Starting with the zombies. Got Undead Warchief, 2 generic and 2 black for a 1/1 zombie, and it says zombie spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and zombie creatures you control get +2/+1. So this is a lord. This is like a super lord. I almost never see any kind of creature that says other creatures of this type get +2/+1. That is just huge. So Ultra Lord also makes them 1 less to cast. I mean, one of the best tribal cards kind of in the game that I've ever seen. Super cool. Next we got Death Baron, my next lord, 1 generic and 2 black for a zombie wizard. It's a 2/2, and it says skeletons you control and other zombies you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. So he doesn't give himself Death Touch at all. Next we have Lord of the Accursed, 2 generic and a black for a zombie. It says other zombies you control get +1/+1, and you can pay 1 and a black and tap it, and all zombies you control gain menace until the end of the turn, which means they can't be blocked except for by 2 or more creatures, and that's really huge in getting in that extra combat damage and finishing the game. And Lord of the Accursed is a 2/3 zombie. So we got lots of zombies in here that have a lower converted mana cost than Varina, because we want to get those zombies out early enough so that we can use her ability. Which, by the way, her ability is really useless when you don't have any cards in your hand. So another thing you want to remember with this deck is to try to always have cards in your hand, so that way you're not just simply drawing and discarding the cards that you draw. You know, you want to have cards in your hand so you have options for what cards you keep. Is a huge thing with Varina, I've realized. If you end up with no hand in Varina, she is a lot less useful. So continuing with our lords, we got Diagraph Captain, 1 generic, a blue and a black for a zombie soldier, which is a 2/2. It has Death Touch, and it says other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life. And so this is kind of part of our combo. We're going with the Aristocrats strategy with the combo. You know, what do you know? What a surprise. That's really a zombie thing to do. So our next zombie here is Shapeshifter, which is technically a zombie because it's all creature types. It's 1 generic and a blue for Shapesharer, which is a Shapeshifter 1/1, and for 2 generic and a blue, target Shapeshifter becomes a copy of target creature until your next turn. So this is the only Shapeshifter in the deck, so it can basically make itself into a copy of any target creature until your next turn. And it's a zombie for only 2 mana, which, you know, goes along with Varina. We want to have cheap zombies out before we cast her so that we can attack with those zombies and draw cards and gain life. So White of Precinct 6 is another cheap zombie, a 1/1 for 1 generic and a black, but White of Precinct 6 gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your opponent's graveyards. So this is definitely better later on in the game, or if you can play it early on in the game and just attack with it, you'll beef up Varina, you'll trigger Varina's ability, excuse me, and then you'll hopefully have it survive long enough to get beefed up itself. Alright, Diagraph Ghoul is 1 black for a 2/2 zombie that enters the battlefield tapped. Yeah, sweet. Lich Lord of Unk is 1, a blue and a black for a zombie wizard 2/2, and it's got 2 abilities. The first one is you pay a blue and a black and tap it and put a 1/1 blue and black zombie wizard creature token into play. And the next ability is you pay 2 blue and 2 black, and you don't have to tap it, and target player loses X life and puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of zombies you control. So with this, you can mill your opponent out, or you can just drain them out of their life. So kind of a great win condition on 1 card. Perfect for this deck. Getting tokens out is what we want. Binding Mummy is a 2/2 zombie for just 1 and a white. So I really like these mono white zombie cards, simply because instead of just making them white zombies, they made them mummies specifically. I think that's really cool. That's why they're white, is because they're mummies. They're not just normal zombies. So Binding Mummy says whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, you may tap target artifact or creature. So that actually comes into play quite a bit if you get this out early and you end up tapping down your opponent's stuff. Really can help out a lot, absolutely. Gravecrawler is great with our combo. It is 1 black for a 2/1, and it says Gravecrawler can't block, but you may cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. So this is the creature that we're getting back and forth from our graveyard back onto the battlefield to hopefully drain our opponents of enough life to win the game with cards like Diagraph Captain. So Zombie Outlander is a blue and a black, and it's a zombie scout, which is a 2/2, and it has protection from green. And so that means it can't be the target of green spells or abilities from green creatures. It can't be blocked or dealt damage from green sources. And that's pretty much what protection from green is. So that's really important in this deck because it's a form of evasion. You know, if somebody is playing with green creatures, they can't block this, and then Varina's trigger gets to happen kind of for free because you get a free attack out of it. So that's why I like that. Vindictive Lich is 3 and a black for a zombie wizard, which is a 4/1, and when Vindictive When Vindictive Lich dies, choose one or more. Each mode must target a different player. So target opponent sacrifices a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards, or target opponent loses 5 life. So if you can keep recurring Vindictive Lich somehow, that is really powerful and can win you the game by itself. But most of the time, he's just gonna kind of do his thing once or twice, and that's the most value you're usually gonna get out of him. But it's pretty much worth it because in a multiplayer game, you definitely want to have options. So Kalidas, Trader of Get, is 2 generic and 2 black for a legendary vampire warrior with lifelink. He's a 3/4. And he says, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. And for 2 generic and a black, you may sacrifice another vampire or zombie and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kalidas, Trader of Get. This one's a little out of order. We're supposed to be just talking about zombies here. So Kalidas, what are you doing here? You don't belong in the zombie stack yet. Talking about just zombies now. So Eternal of Harsh Truths is 2 generic and a blue for a zombie cleric, which is a 1/3, and it has Afflict 2. Whenever this creature becomes blocked, a defending player loses 2 life. And whenever Eternal of Harsh Truths attacks and isn't blocked, you get to draw a card. So this guy actually does pretty great things. Whenever I got him out, I usually draw about 1 or 2 cards off of him, and he costs less to cast than Varina, so he's able to trigger her ability as well. And also really important for, again, keeping our hand full, right? So that we can, have cards to discard and not lose our entire hand to Varina's ability. So Rancid Rats is 1 generic and a black for a zombie rat, a 1/1, and it has Skulk, so this creature can't be blocked by creatures with power, with greater power. And it also has Death Touch, so any amount of damage this deals to a creature is enough to destroy it. I played a game yesterday where this actually destroyed some like 33 horror creature, that blue-black creature that has power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. Yeah, so this killed one of those just with Death Touch, just being a blocker. So having a little Death Touch zombie is very useful. But also that Skulk ability is what's really important here. It gives this creature the ability to not be blocked and to therefore again trigger Varina and draw us cards, gain us life. Accursed Horde is 3 generic and a black for a zombie creature. That's a 3/3, and for 1 generic and a black, target attacking zombie gains indestructible until the end of the turn. So getting that damage in with the attacking zombie so that we can trigger Varina. All about triggering Varina here. Same thing with Bog Raiders. 2 generic and a black for a creature with evasion. Right? It's a 2/2 with Swamp Walk, which means this creature is unblockable as long as a defending player controls a swamp. And considering how many players are playing Urborg out there, Tomb of Yawgmoth, there's a very high chance that you're going to be seeing some swamps out there. Absolutely. I've pretty much never seen a game without some black in it. All right, Newscraft Mob is 4 generic and 2 black for a 0/0 zombie, but Newscraft Mob enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a player casts a spell, any player including you, remove a +1/+1 counter from Newscraft Mob. If you do, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So basically, this is going to get you 5 2/2 black zombies over time. Pretty much by the time it's your next turn, if you're paying attention. This should just have you 5 2/2 black zombies on the battlefield for 6 mana. And that's pretty great. Definitely. And that zombie does not enter the battlefield tapped, by the way, which a lot of the zombies, zombie tokens do. So you got to look out for that sometimes. Sometimes the zombie tokens enter tapped. So next we got Wayward Servant, which is another combo piece in the deck. It's 1 white and a black for a mummy zombie, if you look closely. It's a 2/2, and whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. And so we'll talk about the combo a little more now. So the combo pieces to drain the opponents are Wayward Servant, We got Diagraph Captain, which we talked about earlier. Whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life. And kind of the same thing happens with Plague Belcher here. For 2 generic and a black, you get a zombie beast, and it's a 5/4 with menace, which is huge. Having power 5 and menace is huge, even though when Plague Belcher enters the battlefield, you got to put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control, which very often I am lucky enough to have Gravecrawler, so I just put the -1/-1 counters on Gravecrawler, and it dies, and then that drains the opponents of 1 life, because that's this last ability here. Whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And so then, because of Gravecrawler's ability, I'm able to recast it from the graveyard because I control a zombie, and I get this right back out, and I just have a nice 5/4 menace, which is very nice. So anyway, back to the combo. We then need a sacrifice outlet. So we got 3 sacrifice outlets. We probably could use some more sacrifice outlets, maybe an Ashnod's Altar, but it's very hard to find room in this deck when you're trying to find ways to protect your creatures and have all your combo pieces. I mean, there's not a lot of room. So anyway, we got at least 3 creatures in here that give you a sacrifice outlet that you don't need to pay any mana to activate. So we got Corpse Blockade, 2 generic and a black for a 1/4 with Defender, and it says sacrifice another creature, and that will give Corpse Blockade Death Touch until the end of the turn. And so you can sacrifice as many creatures as you want to this without paying any sort of mana cost. So that's why this works with the combo, because we can just do it over and over again. Same thing with Carrion Feeder, 1 black for a 1/1 zombie. Carrion Feeder can't block, and you can sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. And then we got Phyrexian Ghoul, 2 generic and a black, and it says sacrifice a creature. Phyrexian Ghoul gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. So another important part to mention in the combo also that kind of finishes it off a lot of the time is Grey Merchant of Asphodel, 3 generic and 2 black for a 2/4 zombie, and whenever Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So each black mana in the mana costs of permanent you control count towards your devotion to black. So what you want to do is cast a bunch of zombies, have a bunch of zombies out, and make this the last zombie you cast to really drain everyone out. So, sorry, let me just try to find the other piece, because I want to talk about the combo here before we move on. So there it is, if you hadn't guessed. Rooftop Storm, also known as Zomniscience. So Rooftop Storm is an enchantment which says you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast. So this is a 5 generic and a blue for this enchantment. Crazy that's a blue enchantment that activates the combo here. So basically all your zombies cost 0 to cast, whether you're casting them from the graveyard or from your hand. Their mana cost is basically now 0, including your commander, though you will need to still pay the commander tax for your commander. So Rooftop Storm, important part of the combo. You pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for your zombies. So what you do is you get Rooftop Storm out, and then you have your Gravecrawler, and your Carrion Feeder, and a creature like Diagraph Captain. Okay, so what you do is you have all these 4 permanents on the battlefield, and then you sacrifice Gravecrawler to Carrion Feeder, and that is going to cause Diagraph Captain's triggered ability to happen, where the zombie's going to die and target opponent loses 1 life. And then you can recast Gravecrawler from your graveyard for free with Rooftop Storm and get him back on the battlefield, which is going to allow you to sacrifice it again to Carrion Feeder, draining another opponent of 1 life, and then you can cast Gravecrawler again from the graveyard for free with Rooftop Storm, and then start the cycle all over again. So there's several different ways this can happen, because this can happen with Plague Belcher, and it's going to be draining everyone whenever Gravecrawler dies, or it can be happening with the Wayward Servant, and it's just draining him whenever the zombie enters the battlefield. So then I feel like there's one more that does it too. But anyway, that's mostly the combo. But also what's great about the deck is you don't need to combo off. You know, you can just have any of these creatures on the battlefield, and it just really drains your opponent of lots of life whenever you're making little zombie tokens. Again, what I usually do is I have Rooftop Storm out, and actually the artifact, which the Vanquisher's banner, I think, which just says whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, you draw a card. So you choose zombies, and with Rooftop Storm, you're casting those spells for 0, and you're drawing a card every time you do, and hopefully you're drawing more zombies, which you can also cast for 0. And then at the end of it all, you always cast Gary at the very end, Great Merchant of Asphodel, which is just going to drain all of your opponents of all the black mana symbols and all those zombies you previously cast. So that's kind of the combo we want to go off with. So now let's talk about some non-zombie creatures, starting with one of the most essential, which is, jeez, I can't remember this guy's name. It is Grave Titan. That's it, Grave Titan. And so let's bring up the English version real quick here. So Grave Titan is a giant, a 6/6 with Death Touch, 4 generic and 2 black, and whenever Grave Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Yeah, I got a message from Ryan. What do you know? Yeah, so Diagraph Captain is going to enter the battlefield and instantly get you 2/2 black zombie tokens onto the battlefield that don't enter tapped, by the way. And whenever it attacks, you get 2 more 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. And whenever those enter the battlefield, if you have a Wayward Servant, you're going to be draining your opponents of 1 life each for each of those black zombies. So it helps our strategy a lot just to have tons of little zombies. Essential in any zombie deck, really. Every zombie deck pretty much has that, which is why it's gone up in price, so you should pretty much try to get one now. Archfiend of Ifnir is 3 generic and 2 black for a 5/4 demon with flying, and whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. So this is huge with Varina, because her ability says you draw that many cards, gain that much life, and then you discard that many cards. So right on your commander, we got this discard effect, which really goes well with Archfiend of Ifnir. As soon as you're discarding with Varina, you're basically killing most of your opponent's creatures, or at least weakening to the point where they're not going to be a threat anymore. And this was also a suggestion from someone on the chat. I mean, I don't think of everything like I should. Maybe it's obvious to some people, but yeah, it really helps out when people throw suggestions out there, and this is kind of an obvious choice. Like, yeah, very cool. As soon as you're discarding, you're killing your opponent's creatures. You're making them very, very small at the least. And it also has cycling for 2, so you can discard from your hand and draw a card. And back to Kalidas, Trader of Get, now that we're talking about non-zombie creatures. So just another great way to gain life and create zombies. So again, this is the 3/4 Vampire Warrior with lifelink, and whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield. Just very important to be able to exile some creatures, when you're destroying them, and at the same time you're getting the advantage of getting those black zombie creature tokens, which might be causing you to drain your opponent's life, maybe. We know if you got certain zombies out, who knows. Alright, our next non-zombie creature in the deck is Burnished Heart, 3 generic for a 2/2 elk, and you can pay 3 generic to sacrifice Burnished Heart and search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Very cool in a deck that allows you to recur creatures. Also just very essential kind of in any deck that's not running green. I suggest having a Burnished Heart. It's a blocker, and you can respond to damage when you block with it by sacrificing it, so therefore it's still going to prevent all that attacker's damage, and you're still going to get the 2 lands onto the battlefield. So very great card for any deck that's not green. Sacred Cat is our first creature that's not a zombie that wants to be a zombie. It really does. It's a cute little kitty, and it's a 1/1 for 1 white with lifelink, and it has Embalm for 1 white. So you pay 1 white and exile this card from your graveyard to create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a white zombie cat with no mana cost, and you Embalm only as a sorcery. So this can turn into our little zombie that can attack and trigger Varina's ability. Gain us some life along the way. Angel of Sanctions is fabulous in this deck, just in its ability to you know, act as a little bit more removal, which we need, you know, especially with something like, I don't know, Blood Moon maybe out. So 3 generic and 2 white for a 3/4 angel with flying. And when Angel of Sanctions enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Angel of Sanctions leaves the battlefield. And it has Embalm for 6. So for 5 generic and a white, you exile this card from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a white zombie angel with no mana cost. Embalm only as a sorcery. So this comes in, gets rid of your opponent's biggest threat, at least temporarily, but if they kill it, you get to do it again. So that's why this is a lot more powerful than many of the cards with the same ability, because you have the ability to recur this creature right on the creature's own text. So that's why I think it's very deserving of the mythic rare spot, and very great in this deck. Gets to be a zombie. Champion of Wits is 2 generic and a blue for a Naga Wizard. That is a 2/1, and when Champion of Wits enters the battlefield, you may draw cards equal to its power. If you do, discard 2 cards. So instead of Embalm, this one has Externalize, which is a little better than Embalm. And it says you can pay 5 generic and 2 blue to exile this card from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie Naga Wizard with no mana cost, externalize only as a sorcery. So when this comes back, it's a 4/4 instead of a 2/1, which is why externalize is a bit better than Embalm a lot of the time. And so this is going to be drawing us 2 cards the first time, 4 cards the second time. Fabulous. Fabulous for the deck. Alright, now into our 2 Planeswalkers. We have Liliana Vess, which is 3 generic and 2 black for a Planeswalker Liliana, which enters with 5 loyalty counters. For +1, target player discards a card. For -2, we get to do what we usually do with Liliana, which is search our library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. Remember, that card does not go to your hand. Also, for -8, you can Rise of the Dark Realms, which is a card that says put all creature cards in all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So Liliana Vess, again, is most of the time just going to be a nice tutor that hopefully will let us tutor twice. You know, I could definitely use some more tutors in the deck. You know, let's maybe call this a more budget-friendly version of the deck, because, you know, you could do a lot of busted stuff in here that I don't have. But this is a great option. I put Liliana Vess in almost all my black decks because it has the potential to tutor you 2 cards. That's huge. And also, just, you know, having options is great, which is why Planeswalkers are great. You know, you might have that situation where you know someone has 1 card in their hand that you hate, and you can make him discard it too. So great card for this deck. We also have Dovan Bond, which is 2 generic, a white and a blue. It's a Planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty counters. For +1, until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0, and its activated abilities can't be activated. And for -1, you gain 2 life and draw a card. And for -7, you get an emblem with your opponents can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap steps. So with Dovan Bond, unfortunately, again, most of the time we're going to be using the -1 ability and just gaining 2 life and drawing a card. You know, we want to draw them cards. But also being able to protect himself and protect you with the first ability is great. And if you ever get to pop off that last ability, that's huge. Alright, so that's it for our Planeswalkers. Now on to our non-creature spells that that aren't, you know, kind of ramp or draw or Planeswalkers. You know, these are just kind of my extra pile. So we got Army of the Damned, 5 generic and 3 black for a sorcery, and it says put 13 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped. So this is one of the ones that makes tapped zombie tokens. And it has flashback for 10, so you can play 7 and 3 black, and you may cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost and exile it. So this has the potential to get you 26 2/2 black zombie creature tokens on the battlefield. Yeah, that's humongous. Or just imagine if you also had Anointed Procession out, which is an enchantment that's 3 generic and a white that says if an effect, meaning if for any reason you would get 1 or more tokens under your control, you get twice that many of those tokens instead. So this is not just creature tokens, by the way, if you want to be playing some treasures or something, or clues maybe. So, you know, with this you'll be getting 52 zombies. You could get up to 52 zombies with Army of the Damned and Anointed Procession. Yeah, that's great if you know, are trying to drain your opponents out. All right, next we got Rise of the Dark Realms, card we talked about earlier. It's 7 generic and 2 black for a sorcery, and it says put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Late game, this is one of the common game enders in Commander. It's one of the essential black cards in Commander, absolutely. Just being able to get all of your opponent's creatures, which died over the course of the game. Definitely a card you want to hold on to. Even if you have the mana, you want to wait till your opponent's graveyards are nice and full, and boom, you gain control of all those creatures. So huge. So, Rise of the Dark Realms also works really well with Grey Merchant of Asphodel in that, you know, when he enters the battlefield, he enters at the same time as all the creatures that enter the battlefield. So, Gary is going to trigger with all of that devotion to black, gaining you a ton of life. So, really great card if you have Grey Merchant of Asphodel in the graveyard. Zombie Apocalypse is very similar. 3 generic and 3 black for a sorcery. Return all zombie cards, zombie creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, then destroy all humans. So if anyone's gotten humans, they also get blown up, which there are quite a bit of humans in all the formats, really. And yeah, it's kind of like a mini Rise of the Dark Realms just for you. Very cool. All right, continuing. We got Debt to the Deathless. This is one of my common ways to just finish off the game when everyone's low on life. So it's X, 2 white, and 2 black for this sorcery, and it says each opponent loses 2 times X life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So let's say you had 3 opponents in a Common Commander game, and you cast this for X is 8, so that means you had to pay a total of 12 mana, you know, for the 2 white and the 2 black, and the X is 8. So that would mean each opponent would lose 16 life, and 16 times 3 is, oh geez, that's so much life. That is so much life. So that is going to be 48 life with Debt to the Deathless that you gain, and yeah, each opponent loses 16, and that's just huge. Yeah, you definitely want to play this, you know, obviously later on in the game when you got a ton of mana, but great way to finish off the game. Next, we're getting into the ramp. So, we got Soul Ring. If you have a Commander deck and you're not playing a Soul Ring, then you better be playing online, I guess. Alright, Crucible of Worlds is 3 generic for an artifact, and it says you may play land cards from your graveyard. And so this is really huge with Varina because we're often discarding our land cards to her ability because we don't want to be discarding our other spells. But with Crucible of Worlds, you get to play those lands from your graveyard. So that's really great in this deck. Also, if someone's, you know, milling you at all, you get to get those lands. And mill is quite a thing. So Dreamstone Hedron, next for 6 mana. It's an artifact that you can tap for 3 mana. Or you can pay 3 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to draw 3 cards. So, yeah, kind of fills 2 slots here, which is very important for this deck because we need lots of room for all of our other, you know, utility spells in the deck. There's not a lot of room when you're trying to put in about, you know, 30 low cast zombies. You need a lot of other big spells also to, you know, help you finish off the game. So this fills up a draw card slot, and it, you know, also adds mana to our mana pool. Land Tax is a fabulous ramp card. It's 1 white for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So if an opponent doesn't control more lands than you, then this doesn't work, but at least your opponents don't control more lands than you, so that's a plus. So yeah, if at all your opponents control more lands than you, which they probably will considering you're not playing green, if anyone's playing green, they'll probably have more lands than you, and you'll get to get 3 basic land cards from your deck and put them on into your hand. We got actually plenty of basics in here because, like I said, we're kind of worried about any sort of Blood Moon. Because I had lots of non-basics, but there's quite a bit of non-basics in here too, really. So, more ramp spells. We got all of the monuments. We'll start with Kefnit's Monument, 3 generic for a legendary artifact. Blue creature spells you cast costs 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So, all of the monuments are really helpful when we're trying to combo off, you know, and we're trying to get creatures back and forth with Wayward Servant or, you know, any of the other, you know, what do you call them? Aristocrat creatures, excuse me. So yeah, all the monuments help out a lot with that, just getting those to activate. I mean, you don't have to go ultimate to Aristocrat drain someone to death. So we got Bontu's Monument, 3 generic for a legendary artifact. Black creature spells cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And Aketra's Monument, 3 generic for a legendary artifact. White creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. Excuse me, don't want to get in any copyright trouble. Better start the metal over again. Alright. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you get a 1/1 white warrior creature token. So that could potentially be doubled with Anointed Procession, you know. But what's really great is if you have all 3 of these out, every time you cast a creature spell, you're going to be getting a warrior token, opponent's going to lose a life and you gain a life, and you get to tap something that's already tapped. That's kind of the downside of Kefnit's Monument, is it has to be tapped already with Kefnit's Monument. But those are all pretty cool. Again, helps out with the combo. And next, really helps out with the combo here is Vanquisher's Banner. 5 generic for an artifact. Says, as Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, so this is an anthem. And whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. So when you got this and Rooftop Storm, it's absolutely insane because you're casting things for 0 and then drawing a card, which could potentially be another zombie, which you're also going to cast for 0, is going to draw you another card, potentially could draw you another zombie. So these two together, again, it's not an ultimate combo, but man, you're going to be potentially just winning the game right there, especially if you got Grey Merchant of Asphodel in your hand. So essential for the deck. Absolutely. Vanquisher's Banner totally goes in the deck. Next for our continuing with draw card spells. Notion Rain is 1 generic, a blue and a black for a sorcery from the recently released Guilds of Ravnica, and it says survey 2, then draw 2 cards. Notion Rain deals 2 damage to you, and to survey 2 means look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest on top of your library in any order. So this really helps out with our deck where we do want to put certain cards in the graveyard. Absolutely. Oftentimes we want to fill up the graveyard. We've already shown you we have the Liliana, which has the Rise of the Dark Realms ability on her. We also have Rise of the Dark Realms. There's also another card in here which can be really useful with that. Continuing with the draw card spells, we got Demon Lord Bells Unlocked. It's a creature, kind of should have been in the creature spells slot. Anyway, so we got 4 generic and 2 black for a legendary creature, Elder Demon. Really like that creature type. The Elder Demon is a 6/6 flying trample, and whenever Demon Lord Bells Unlock enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Put that card into your hand. If the card's converted mana cost is 4 or greater, repeat this process. Demon Lord Bells Unlock deals 1 damage to you for each card put into your hand this way. So I brought this out into the deck because we don't have many creature type bombs in the deck. You know, there's not a lot of big bombs in the deck that are creatures. So this is a good demon. Yeah, I mean, he's a bad demon, but, you know, he's a great demon for this deck because it's going to be drawing us. I mean, last night I drew 4 cards off of this playing this deck. It dealt me 4 damage, but yeah, I drew 4 cards. That was awesome. And, you know, huge flying trample blocker, always good. Not many zombies can do that, so I think that's the great non-zombie card for the deck. That does put our creature count actually up to 32, including Varina, so that's pretty good. Next, we got another new card, Discovery and Dispersal, which is Discovery is a sorcery for 1 generic and a hybrid blue-black mana, so you can play either a blue or a black mana and 1 generic to cast this spell. And it says survey 2, then draw a card. And if you choose to cast the other side, it's an instant speed spell called Dispersal, which is 3 generic, a blue and a black, and it says each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, then discards a card. So I like to think of this as kind of the Crackling Doom of Dimir. You know, you get to get rid of whatever their biggest threat is. With Crackling Doom, it's whatever has the highest power, I think. But yeah, this is whatever has the highest converted mana cost, which is great. Yeah, but more often than not, I think we're going to be casting Discovery early in the game to, you know, survey and draw a card. But yeah, definitely late game, Dispersal is also a fabulous option. So I really like this card in this deck. Next we got Forbidden Alchemy, 2 generic and a blue for an instant, and it says look at the top 4 cards of your library, then put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And it also has flashback for 7, so you can cast it from your graveyard for 7. So yeah, get any of the top 4 cards. What I like about this is it's not going to whiff. You know, lots of these cards says look at the top 4 cards of your library, you know, select this type of card and put it into your hand. This is just, you get any one of them and put it into your hand. So if you are playing any of those cards that are like, you know, say Elvish Rejuvenator, you know, look at the top 4 cards of your library, get a basic land and put them into your hand or something, you know. I mean, so often they're going to whiff. They're not going to find any lands, you know. So I definitely love Forbidden Alchemy, mostly for that fact. It's going to get you something. Alhammer's Archive is very powerful in this deck. 5 generic for a legendary artifact. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. And if you would draw a card, except for the first one you draw on each of your draw steps, draw 2 additional cards instead. So with Varina, you're going to be drawing twice as many cards as the number of zombies you're attacking with, and you're going to be gaining twice that much life, but you still only have to discard equal to the number of zombies that you're attacking with. So pretty essential in this deck, and even with no hand, this fixes the no hand problem. You know, suddenly you're able to always have a hand as long as you got Alhammer's Archive out, so very powerful. And next we talked about that sort of last Rise of the Dark Realms card. It's Living Death, which is 3 generic and 2 black. For a sorcery, it says each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures he or she controls, then puts all cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. So this is a long way of saying each player kind of switches all creatures they have on the battlefield with all creatures they have in their graveyard. So if your opponents have no creatures in their graveyard, then it's basically a one-sided board wipe. You know, if they have some creatures in the graveyard, they're going to get them back, but, you know, this is mostly going to synergize with our deck, you know, where we get all of our creatures back, hopefully Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and just kill everybody that sort of way. You know, Grey Merchant and the Wayward Servant. Alright, next we got our next board wipe, which is called Cyclonic Rift. And if you don't know what that does, you should look it up. If you're playing blue, you should own a Cyclonic Rift. It basically says if you pay 7 mana, you get to return all non-land permanents your opponents control to their owner's hand. If you only pay the 2 mana, you just get to return 1 non-land permanent your opponent controls to its owner's hand. But man, for that 7 mana and its instant speed, this can really ruin games. I find the most useful time to play this at instant speed is during your opponent's discard step. You respond to your opponent's discard, and so then they're going to have to discard down to hand size. Pretty sweet. Next we got Settle the Wreckage, 2 generic and 2 white for an instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So, if anyone is coming at you, they can get a bunch of lands, but they're not going to get through with all those creatures. One-sided board wipe for sure, though, you know, it's only going to kill one opponent's creatures. But, again, we're a combo deck, you know, so we're not as concerned with what other people are doing as much as trying to set up our combo pieces. You know, we're trying to react to what they're doing, so this is a reaction sort of board wipe. While you're coming at me, I'm reacting by exiling all of your creatures. But we're not being as proactive, like I said, in the strategy, though we can be if the combo fails. But, you know, when you're playing a combo deck, keep in mind, the important thing is to get the combo going, you know. Restore the Peace is very similar, except unfortunately they have to deal the damage. So Restore the Peace is 1 generic, a white, and a blue. For an instant speed spell, return each creature that dealt damage this turn to its owner's hand. So if someone comes at you with a bunch of things and you can't block for some reason, then at least you get to return all those creatures to their owner's hands. So a pretty cool card. Yeah, for only 3 mana. Merciless Eviction, 4 generic, a white, and a black. For a sorcery, choose 1. Exile all artifacts, or exile all creatures, or exile all enchantments, or exile all planeswalkers. Yeah, so fabulous board wipe when you are just way behind and you just really need to get rid of everything forever. Utter End. Now we're getting into our single target removal, and like I said, we are concerned about pieces that are just going to lock us out of the game, such as Blood Moon. So most of our targeted removal can also kind of deal with Blood Moon. We have Utter End, 2 generic, a white and a black for an instant, exile target non-land permanent. Literally anything that's not a land, including Planeswalkers. Anguished Unmaking, 1 generic, a white and a black for an instant, exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. So again, exile any non-land permanent. This time you got to pay 2 life though. 3 life, excuse me. Next we got Vindicate, a 1, a white and a black for a sorcery, and destroy target permanent. Literally any permanent. And look at that, it's the Weatherlight destroying the Predator flagship on the artwork. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Close up that. I think that's why they didn't make another Predator card, is because it's dead. The Predator isn't coming back. I don't believe. Maybe it will, that'd be sweet. Alright, next we have Negate. So this is kind of going with our targeted removal, because when you're playing a combo deck, you kind of have to mix up your targeted removal with some counter spells. So we got 1 generic and a blue for an instant counter target non-creature spell. So if anyone's trying to counter your combo piece, you can counter that, or you can just counter their giant bomb creature. Out of Bounds is a new counter, which is a lot of fun actually. I've seen it work a few times. It's 3 generic and a blue for an instant. It says counter target spell, but it also has assist, which means another player can pay up to 3 generic mana of this spell's cost. So if someone is trying to Cyclonic Rift the board, or they're just trying to board wipe, or they're trying to do something really annoying, you can team up with other players to counter this spell. And it's got some homunculus dudes on there. Oh, looks like the focus was out there for a second, sorry. Oh, my dog's whining at me. Yeah, I know, the other dog's barking at you. It's okay, doggies, it's okay. Alright, so continuing, we have Counterspell for just 2 blue. Counter target spell. Very simple, very effective, not very expensive anymore. So I suggest every single person who plays blue run this in their deck. I think one common mistake blue players make is they don't run enough counter spells. It is the power that blue has, is these counter spells, the ability to tell someone no, that doesn't happen. Especially when you're trying to build a deck that's based around creatures. People are going to be trying to target your creatures and kill them, or board wipe your creatures, or just counter your spells. And so you want to be able to counter spells in any blue deck. It's the power of blue. All right, on to the lands. So Unholy Grotto is my favorite land in this deck. It's not legendary, and it has tap to add 1 mana to your mana pool, or you can pay a black and tap it to put target zombie card from your graveyard on top of your library. So I've used this card with Vindictive Lich before, and I found that to be really powerful. So here's Vindictive Lich, which has those options, right? Target opponent sacrifices a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards, or target opponent loses 5 life. Whether there's 3 opponents, or 1 opponent, or 2 opponents, this is a great card to be recurring with Unholy Grotto. Or, also you could be getting your combo pieces that someone killed before, your sacrifice outlet, so very essential in any zombie deck, Unholy Grotto, though a little pricey. Next we got our tapped lands. We got a few tapped lands in here because we want to have some cycling lands, especially with our Arcfiend of Ifnir. So we have Desert of the Glorified, adds a black, or you can cycle it for 2 mana. Desert of the Mindful adds a blue, or you can cycle it for 2 mana. Desert of the True adds a white, or you can cycle it for 2 mana. Alright, so all those deserts enter tapped. And then we have Ipnu Rivulet, which is also a desert that, we have to pay a life if we want this to help us add blue mana. This doesn't enter tapped, but it has a pay 1 and a blue and tap it to sacrifice a desert, so you can sacrifice any of our cycle deserts, or you can sacrifice Ipnu Rivulet as well to have target player put the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So this is great if you're about to use, Living End, or if you're about to do,
Rise of the Dark Realms. Sorry, dogs. Alright, continuing, we have Irrigated Farmland, another cycle land, enters the battlefield tapped, and you can cycle it away for 2 mana. These cycle lands are really great when you combine it with Crucible of Worlds. You know, you cycle them, you draw a card, and then you're able to play them from your graveyard. I was doing that yesterday too, that's pretty sweet. Continuing with the tapped lands, we have Arcane Sanctum, enters tapped, and it can add a white, a blue, or a black. Myriad Landscape enters tapped, adds a colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic lands that share a type and put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So this is 1 land that can end up being 2 lands if you already have enough mana, or, you know, if you just really need mana of a certain color, you can do that. It's a little slow, but it works. Temple of Deceit is one of the scry lands. So it enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library if you want, and it adds a blue or a black. We have Bajuka Bog, which goes in literally every black deck that I've ever made, because they're really cheap cards, so I just suggest you go out and buy them. It enters tapped, but when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Any player's graveyard gets exiled. Really helpful when you're playing against another graveyard synergy deck. Orzhov Basilica enters tapped. These are what are known as the bounce lands, because when they enter the battlefield, they return a land you control to their owner's hand. What's good about them is they all add 2 mana to your mana pool when you tap them. So this one adds both a white and a black when you tap it. The important thing to remember is when these are in your opening hand, you want to make sure you can cast spells as well before putting this out, because if you're just playing this on turn 2 without having cast any of their spells, you're going to end up with 8 cards in your hand because you had to return a land to your hand, and you're going to have to discard one of those cards. So, you know, make sure you have this, you know, if you're just keeping a hand with 2 or 3 lands in it, and one of those lands is a bounce land, I would probably mulligan that hand, unless you know, have mulliganed too much already. Alright, Polluted Delta is what we call a fetch land. You can tap it, pay 1 life, and sacrifice it to search your library for an island or a swamp card and put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So with all the fetches, you know, they don't have to get a basic swamp or a basic island, and those lands don't enter the battlefield tapped either, which is why those are such great non-basic lands. Right. So, as you can see, we're getting into the non-tapped lands now. So we have Exotic Orchard, doesn't enter tapped, and it adds 1 mana to your mana pool of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So pretty helpful in a multicolor deck. Unclaimed Territory, when this enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, which we're going to choose zombies, and this can either add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or it can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and that mana can only be spent to cast the creature of the chosen type, which again, we're going to choose zombies. Temple of the False God goes in pretty much every commander deck I've ever made. Tap it to add 2 generic mana to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. Reliquary Tower says you have no maximum hand size, and you can tap it for mana. Darkwater Catacombs is a signet land. You know, you can pay 1 mana and tap it to add both a blue and a black to your mana pool, so it's a mana fixing land. We have Underground River. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it for a blue and a black, and it deals 1 damage to you. Blue or a black, and it deals 1 damage to you. Next we have Command Tower. Goes in pretty much any commander deck ever made, unless you're playing a mono color deck, which you don't need one then. Well, alright, so continuing, we have Drowned Catacomb. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island or a swamp. So usually this doesn't enter tapped. And then we have the basics. So for planes, we have 1. We have more than 1. Sorry, I added that 1 in there. Let's go with the islands. With islands, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 islands. For planes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planes. And for swamps, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 swamps, for a total of 37 lands. And that's the new version of Varina Lich Queen. And it's actually done pretty good for me, finally. It's taken a lot of work, but, you know, your comments have helped out a lot. So thank you very much for watching. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care. Take it easy.